Sin Chow, cocksuckers, and welcome back to Jinka fucking Jabo. So guys, well, I wish we could be talking about more important things like the revolution that's still going on in Iran and actual human rights issues and public issues. I guess we're going to resume just talking about our kind of buffoonish and kind of lovably out there unfiltered president and the things that he allegedly says, whether in the White House or behind closed doors with bipartisan meetings or whatever is going on. And the words he uses, which aren't exactly on tape, unlike if we remember Vice President Biden right after Obamacare was passed, he was caught on a hot mic shaking the president's hand, shaking Obama's hand, and saying, this is a big fucking deal. And, you know, it's very clear, and I remember Obama, and I rewatched the tape, and I remember Obama just kind of shrugged, and you could tell he was not impressed with what Biden had done. And yet Biden here is he is both the top runner, I guess, next to Bernie Sanders, whom they don't allow into the polls, but he's the top runner for the next potential Democratic candidate. And unless we count Oprah, saying Obama, unless we count Oprah as a possibility, people are saying of the establishment mainstream Democratic candidates that Biden would be the one in that role. And Biden just said it's deplorable, or I wish I had written down the tweet, but he was criticizing Trump on Twitter for using the word shithole allegedly in the speech. And you know, as Stefan Molyneux brilliantly said, he's like, well, he doesn't smell children. You know, like you. He was using harsh language, which reminds me, I guess, of the Bannon-esque statement he said in one of the debates, is that words are just words and actions are otherwise. So anyway, just a few opening thoughts on that, and I'm not very happy with it. You know, I come across often as pro-Trump, and you know, I am conservative in belief, but I think that there is something. I guess there is a bit of a dog whistle effect of racism inherent in what he said, although I'm not going to concede all the way to what the left is saying, and that it's proof, absolute proof that he's racist. Let's not forget that he's done international business before, and the way you get ahead is by judging economies and by placing your money in the most effective places. And then that's where I'd say international business and politics are quite similar. But I did want to address just why I feel it's racist in part, and I would say that's because, well, to begin with, it reminded me of when he said the Mexicans. And not all Mexicans, but I'm saying they're sending their rapists. He doesn't give the disclaimer before he makes the statement. It's an ordering issue, which is nuanced, very nuanced, but with something as serious as racism, it's important to hide it and pose it in certain language. And so hearing him say that during the debates, I remember the Republican debates with, I was watching with my older brother back in the States, you know, I pointed out, you know, that's racist, and my brother and his wife, they're like, well, yeah, it's clearly racist, because there is something intuitively racist about saying, well, this country, their people are, to begin with, rapists or criminals or whatnot. However, there's such a thing as context, and talking about countries in terms of being shitholes, well, that's kind of a crude term, but of course, like many people, I looked it up in the dictionary. And before we go on and talk about the word itself, let's just first of all admit that it's not entirely certain that he said this, unlike Biden on the hot mic saying it's a big fucking deal, or other Democrats over time who have proudly drop the F-bomb. And I note that I swear a lot on the show. You know, I feel kind of weird about that. But I think, well, it's a word that just means a place that's really bad. And I just asked, and I've been part of some discussion boards talking about, well, I mean, what are shitholes that you've been to? And people have been able to list places in their own countries, and even places neighboring themselves. And, you know, I grew up in a poor family, and one of my brothers, who's quite leftist, or liberal, I don't know how exactly to define him, but he's on the left. He said that, you know, coming from a poor family is different than coming from a shithole family. But we never use that word to talk about families, I don't think. I guess the closest equivalent we would have would be white trash or something. There are words. But there are slurs for everybody at every level of the economic spectrum. There are slurs, you know. So I think the left, by overreacting and saying that it means that he's saying all these people are shitholes, when the term shithole applies to a place and not to a person. I mean, that's, I guess, my concession to what he says. Admitting, of course, as I said to begin with, I thought the very notion was a bit racist. Especially when he brings up Norway. I mean, what does Norway have? As Ben Shapiro smartly pointed out, we need to, if we are really going to get over this identitarian setup, we need to make our standards clear. We need to have meritocracy-based requirements for entering and exiting our country, because that's how borders work. You know, I respect borders when I go places. I know the whole process. I know what it's like to wait for a visa and to pay money, sometimes to get rejected, and sometimes you have to get letters in the mail or something. But I find it, you know, criminal and risky by nature to violate these laws. But, you know, at the same time, we're not talking about somewhere like North Korea or something. All heavy thoughts, man. But the other thing I wanted to point out, which I thought was pretty funny, was just the media reaction to the use of the word. And it was like that South Park episode, if you remember, where the kid says, oh, they're going to say shit on TV, and so the whole town goes crazy. And this was, I don't know when this episode was, like 10 or 15 years ago. And they start counting how often they say the word shit, numbering it off at the bottom. Like anyone gives a fuck. But I wish I could swear less, because that's one thing that people point out to me in like face-to-face contact, is I don't really think about it that much. And I think part of that is, you know, living in foreign countries where it doesn't register, or it doesn't have the same impact as saying it in the native tongue. Reminds me of a funny story. In Korea, you know, the word for fuck you is sheep pile, which is phonetically the same as the number 18. And on my lunch breaks, I always went to a restaurant, and the one item on the menu that I liked most was the number 18, but I always felt weird saying it. Sheep pile juseo. Please give me number 18, but it also means please fuck me. It's just words, man. And it's also unverified, not on tape. Trump should be smarter than to say things like that. But at the same time, when you talk that way all the time, it gets harder and harder to really understand it, to really grok what he's saying. And there seems to be this great impulse right now just to put in text directly everything he says, and that fascinating and not exactly erudite idiolect that he has. And it's both hilarious, but it's also a major distraction to real international problems and real policy problems that we are having. Reading Fire and Fury, I'm a couple chapters into it, and it's been funny seeing his speeches written out verbatim, because you say them in his voice. you know. I'm not even going to attempt it right now, even though I like trying it. Everyone likes doing it, but nobody has a very good Trump voice, and I'm not an impressions guy or anything, but I just thought, of course he sounds like a complete idiot, but at the same time, let's really parse what he's saying, and let's really figure out what benefits and what deficits he brings to the table, which are harder to measure, I would say. Anyway, that's all I fucking gotta say. Swearing on TV, I am sorry, I still do it, but like George Carlin, the words you can't say on television, I like that it's all changed. And you know, I just really respect free speech, and being able to say crass things is part of that. So, it's the way she goes.